Hi, and welcome to another episode of Conversation with a Chef. I'm Jo Rittey, and I love sharing with you the conversations I get to have with talented and passionate chefs. It's the backstory, if you will, to the food they're putting up. I begin today by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, traditional custodians of the unceded land where this conversation takes place, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I drove out to Heide Museum of Modern Art on one of those moody Melbourne days where the sky feels low and the landscape seems to have been arranged by a painter, which at Heide it sort of has. Sitting out the back in the museum office, looking out the window, the view felt like part of the experience before the conversation had even begun. And then Laura Boulton and I just started talking. As with all my favourite conversations with chefs, we just launched in. No formal introduction, no neat beginning, just straight into the gardens, the old houses, the kitchen, and the strange, wonderful things growing on the grounds. Medlars, cardoons, herbs, flowers, and whatever else the garden team brings her to see if she can make something of it. Laura is thoughtful, articulate, and incredibly generous in the way she talks about food, waste, creativity, burnout, education, and the restless, many-tentacled mind of a chef. She's spent 26 years in kitchens across hotels, fine dining, cafes and events, and now at Heide Kitchen she's found a place where history, art, gardens and food are layered together. This conversation is about that, but it's also about what happens when a chef keeps asking questions of the garden, of the bin, of the plate, and of the way we've all been taught to think about food. Just even looking out here, looking out that window, it looks like an artwork.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Well, this is the second house.
Oh, that's right, yes.
So the original house is up on the hill. That's the cottage that they started in.
Yeah.
And then they built the second house to house themselves so that they could have like an artist commune up in the old house. And that was where all the artists would come and like come in and out of as sort of like communal living, I guess.
Yeah.
And this was their big house. And so because of that, there's two kitchen gardens. So there's one on the top of the hill there. That's the more sort of, I guess it's more fertile. It's been tended to longer. And being that it's on the top of the hill, it has greater sunshine and light and water drainage and all that sort of stuff. The second kitchen garden, which is down here, it's like kind of in the bottom of a bit of a gully.
Yeah.
So it can flood in winter.
Oh, okay.
So it's less productive.
Yeah.
And slightly less fertile in the bottom half. The top half is a little bit more raised. But the gardeners tend to use that more for flowers.
Okay.
There's a lot of roses and things down there. They tend to use that for a lot more flowers and sort of ornamental stuff. And the top garden is a lot more productive for fruit and vegetables. And there's the orchard up the top as well.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
Do you have a say in the in what's in the kitchen garden?
Yeah. So I've been here now 2 years, and over that time developed the relationships with the museum and the garden team and everything, because quite a lot of that was very fragmented. We, as a company, this is our 4th year, but we're halfway into our 4th year, really. So the first year was just finding their feet, figuring out what Heide was going to be. The second year is when I arrived halfway through the year. So they were kind of here for 18 months and they were like doing what they could with what they had, but it was a bit sort of like we're still trying to find our feet with everything. And then when I arrived, I built a really good rapport with the garden team, and they started engaging with us a lot more around what was coming and going, because the chefs who were here before were like, oh, this is great, we get stuff from the garden, thanks. But not really understanding the full potential of what's on the grounds. And when I started engaging a lot with Rebecca, the gardener at the time, and spending a lot of time with her talking about what was on the grounds, when things were coming in and out of season, and once she really truly understood that I wasn't joking when I said I will use anything, she started to bring me little bits of pieces of things and say, oh, would you use this, would you use that, oh, I've got this, sort of just popped up out of nowhere. And so we started getting very creative with some of the things in the garden, which was really exciting.
Yeah.
Because it meant that she was more excited because there was always things to find, you know. And so she would bring them and say, what can you do with this? And we'd figure out a way of using it. And like things, for example, like The medlars. I don't know if you know what a medlar is, but it's this tiny, I guess it's kind of like a strawberry-sized fruit, but it kind of is like a cross between a nashi and a quince. It's got a very watery texture, but it's grainy like a quince. And it's an old English fruit, and typically they are brown, and when they come off the tree they're very hard and very astringent, and you can't really do anything with them. But you do this process called bletting, which is essentially like letting them sit there until they go overripe, and then they go almost custardy. They're incredibly sweet.
Wow.
And they have like a real custard flavour, but they still have that watery texture. But they're incredible for jam.
Okay.
So we did this process just for fun, just to see if we could do it. And it was quite a process because there's a lot of seeds inside. But we made this rhubarb and medlar jam, and it was just sensational, like so delicious. So yeah, that was just one of the random things that grows in the garden that everyone was like, I don't think so, mate. And I was like, bring it on. Let's find a way.
I love that though. And I think, isn't it fascinating, these fruits and vegetables that you have to do things to before they're edible or before they're delicious, and that people have worked out what that is. Even coffee. Like how
it's like they would have just sat there without refrigeration in the old days and gone bad, and then they were like, oh, we can't waste them, but they smell really good. Yeah. Why don't we just try making them into sugary jam? Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, like even things like the cardoons, for example. Like no one's ever heard of a cardoon in Australia, like that's just not a thing. But they're fascinating because if you look at them, they look like so prehistoric. They're enormous, big thistles, essentially.
Right, yeah.
They're part of the artichoke family. So they grow a flower like an artichoke, but the flower is completely inedible because it's all fibres. There's no heart like a normal artichoke. But the leaves, the big stems that come off them, are edible. And in South America, southern states of America, it was a plantation food because they grew out of nowhere and they took no looking after it. And because people were poor and had no food, they learned how to eat them essentially. And so you take the big cores, you strip all the leaves off, you peel them. And you're supposed to sort of go through this process of boiling them to get rid of the bitterness because they're very, very bitter. And so Rebecca brought me down some of these and she's like, I don't know how, I really want to use these because they're an amazing product, but no one ever wants to use them because they take too long to process. And I was like, just give them to me and I'll figure out how to do them. So she gave me a big bucket of them, and then I put them in water in the core room so they didn't go bad. And then just life happened. It got in the way. We got sick. There was an injury in the kitchen. It was chaos for 2 weeks. And over that 2 weeks, we'd consistently had to change the water. And because of that, they had bled out all the bitterness. Oh. And we didn't realise we'd accidentally figured out a way of bletting them, bleeding them. Yeah. And then we went through this process. We peeled them, and then we put them in a bag with a pickling liquid and steamed them until they were soft. And it looks like celery when it's peeled, so it's got the same shape, like a wide version of celery. Anyway, it was really yum. They're really yum. They're really like they're quite fibrous. Okay. It's quite nutty in flavour. And yeah, they were just. I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a little bit like celery, like a little bit nutty in flavour, quite like earthy. And so we were putting that in our seasonal caponata that we put under the fish. So it's like it's like braised chickpeas and onions and herb powder that we make, and then we put a seasonal vegetable in there, and that's the sort of the fish garnish through the year, but it changes like every 6 weeks. So we're putting them in there. It was just so yum, but no one had ever heard of cardoons before. And then we just figured out this random way of using them, and we just had a seasonal vegetable garnish for the year, or for the season, sorry, but like it cost us nothing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So like that element of it cost us nothing, except time. Yeah. So Yeah, it's just like no one would touch them, but we figured out a way of using them by accident. Like it's like just things like that. It's just all it takes is a little bit of interest, and then time. So it's just a commitment, really.
Well, it's, often speaking to chefs, they talk about that really important relationship with the supplier. This is like next level because it's right here and you can see it as well. But that's exciting, and also working with someone that's so curious and excited to try those unknown. When I say unknown vegetables and fruits and things,
it's lesser known.
Lesser known because. As you say in other countries, I do feel like, this is age-old lament, that supermarkets here, I mean, I guess some markets are better, but it's just the same old carrots and potatoes and sweet potato and, I don't know, broccoli and zucchini. And
there's not a lot of variety because we come from a very blonde background in terms of like a very neutral palate.
Yeah.
A lot of Australia comes from Europe, like from sort of British Europe. And I think that palate has not really changed much. Like we have an enormous amount of influence from like multicultural facets now. So like modern Australian food is really exciting, for example, because we have such a vast influence from so many different places. Like we have Persian and Southeast Asian and Turkish and Lebanese and like all of these amazing foods. So that's brought us a lot further in our palate. And so we see a lot more in terms of varieties of tomatoes and apples and different types of cucumbers and stuff now. But it's frustrating because we're such a privileged country. We're so incredibly privileged that we're on so many levels, but we'd never really had to use like the lower cuts. We never really had to scrounge for anything. Like, yeah, sure, we had a recession, but how long did that last? Like, that hasn't really impacted generations and upon generations, which has caused people to get really creative, like they had to do through Europe or through Southeast Asia or through, South America or. We haven't had wars like other countries have had. We haven't had the hardships that other countries have had that have forced them into this way of thinking. So we're just constantly searching for the next best. So it's like we're so privileged, which is great in a lot of ways, but it's also sad culturally for us.
Yeah.
Culturally, we're a very shallow country, which is not ideal. The modern landscape of Australia is very multicultural, and it's incredible to be a part of a country that is so progressive. But we've just got nothing holding us up in terms of foundational culture.
Yeah, that's really true.
Like in terms of like white Australia, which is the sad part of Australia, has it's culturally bare.
Yeah.
And because we did such awful things when we came, we've lost all of that culture as well. We've lost all of the heart and the soul of what Australian food was before we came. So we're culturally barren as a country, I would say, in terms of historically, which is really sad because we've sort of eradicated the best parts when we arrived, and then we've just continued to eradicate as we've gone higher and higher up the food chain. So anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but I really like the fact that we are so culturally rich now as a modern Australia. I just feel, I guess, a bit sad that we don't have that nostalgic layering that other countries have.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think, I think I mentioned to you I'm a French teacher, and when I love, being in France, and there is just another layer when you have that. That history, and we do, as you say, when we do have the history here, it's just... Yeah,
we just burnt it to the ground.
Burnt it to the ground.
Yeah.
And that they do things in certain ways because that's how you do them, and everyone just knows and understands. It is a very different feeling. Yeah. And it's interesting what you're talking about, the using the lesser cuts and all those kinds of things, and And that whole notion of zero waste that we talk about, that chefs are doing this amazing thing, which you are.
Yeah.
But we should all know how to do that, but we don't.
Yeah.
Because we just are so spoiled that we throw things out.
Yeah, that's what I mean in terms of the privilege, the layers of privilege that we've been developed to have. And I mean, we've created supermarkets, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're the consumers.
Yeah.
They've only tapered in their business model to suit what we are asking for.
For sure.
So we have made that change. We can make that change again.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see that, even though it's commercialised, like the odd bunch fruits, or like free fruit for kids, or like veggie boxes that come with all of the odd fruits and vegetables that no one wants. Kind of like the food rescue movement is huge. I mean, it's great to see it happening on a broader scale, but I think we have so much room to move in terms of what we're capable of as a community to make change. Because as a consumer, we're the ones buying the products. If we stop buying the way we're buying, it changes everything, because they have to change their business models to suit what we want. And they have done that so well that we've created a market that now we don't want.
Yeah.
So it's a bit strange.
I wonder too, I mean, I like cooking, and I find during the week, it's hard to think of things, or to go and buy the things. And I wonder if we've become a society that doesn't cook at home as often either. That maybe people, I'm speaking very broadly, there might be a lack of knowledge too of what to do with all those different things.
100%.
And how to use every part of something, and not not throw things away.
Yeah, it's exactly it, that we're a society of consumers now.
Yeah.
And a society of convenience. Like in the years gone by, in generations past, we had one working parent, not two. We had supermarkets that were only open certain hours. We had availability of products that were truly seasonal, because we didn't have international shipping. We didn't have air freight. We didn't have access to fruits and vegetables from Queensland and WA and everywhere else year round that have the ability to grow those things year round. We had very limited access because it was truly local. And so we had to think outside the box. But now we're so privileged in the sense that, and there is nothing wrong with being that level of privilege. It's great that we have that. We're very lucky. But we have built the society that we live in, like we have been consumers and they have tailored to what we consume.
Yeah.
And so it's convenient. Two working parents, single parents, like families who just don't have the capacity to cook because they've never had to learn how.
No.
Or they've never learned how because it wasn't something that was of interest to their family, and so it was just never passed on. And we're kind of suffering the consequences of that consumerism now. I'm not saying that's a bad thing or there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but it's just an interesting conversation to have.
It is, yeah.
Because we're now looking at things differently, and now everyone's celebrating like, oh, zero waste, that's so cool. Like, let's teach people about that. And I'm like, this is not new. This is history repeating.
Yeah.
I'm just picking up what people put down a long, long time ago. Like, yeah, we have modern techniques now, which is fantastic. Like, dehydrators make everything a lot easier. Like, ovens with steam functions, like sous vide cooking, like all of those things have made our lives a lot easier, and I love that. That's amazing. But these techniques, they're generations upon generations old, and we're just sort of like revisiting the past. To make things, I think we're recognising the damage that we've done in terms of how consumer we were or are, and we're sort of turning the tables on that now and bringing it back in and going, well, hang on a minute, we can't just throw away everything. Like, that doesn't work. Like, now people are starting to recognise that like 60% of the fruit and vegetables that are grown in Australia end up in the bin. Like, how is that a thing? Like 60%, that's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's insane to me that happens. And like there's great companies out there like the food banks and the food rescue companies that are doing stuff and creating meals for people. But it shouldn't get to that point, right? Like, it should just be that the fruit that ends up on our tables and the food that ends up on our tables is the food that's grown. if we're growing too much, then stop growing, slow it down, change the model. Like, we have the power to make those changes. Like, but people are starving too.
Absolutely.
Which blows my mind. It's like we're throwing away 60% of the food that's produced in Australia, but people are starving. Like, how is that a thing? Like, government and policymakers and the people who make the rules around the way that food is produced, stored and delivered have a lot of thinking to do, because and they have put the rules in place on purpose so that people don't get sick, and the regulations are followed, but at the end of the day they're paper pushers and they're not seeing the end result of the consequences of what they started by making these rules. And I know it's very important for food manufacturing to follow a set of guidelines and to be safe for people to eat en masse, and for things to be produced so that we can have them longevity in the products that are produced. But also, where does that end? That has created a system that produces like 60% of its waste, and that's just really sad. So there has to be some form of change that happens that allows a bit of freedom for some of that to not be waste. Like waste, but not just at the end game where the user is, but it's waste from the farms because it doesn't meet spec to go to the supermarket in the first place. Or that it's waste at the farm because it's too expensive to be picked, to be put into the supermarket. Like, it's cheaper for the farmers to let food rot on the ground than it is to have it picked and put in supermarkets or given to people out. Like, that's nonsense.
That is nonsense. So that's one element, but then perhaps there is an element of education. And I know, in school you have food studies or home economics or whatever, but it's a minor. It's a small part of it. I wonder, and I think it's the same with financial literacy.
Yeah.
All of those things that need to be, that are just life skills and knowledge. Perhaps we need to give them a bit more weight in our education.
Everything in this system comes down to education. Absolutely everything comes down to education.
Yeah.
Because if you educate people from an early age, they won't think about things the same way, right? They have an exposure to the fact that they can be, and it's building skills. So you teach them how to boil an egg. You teach them how to do a little stir fry. You teach them how to do some pickling. Those life skills stay with you forever, and then your mindset is forever changed around the way those foods work. So if we start from a young age, even in around education of how food comes out of the ground, it's like the whole Jamie Oliver movement when, back in the early 2000s, kids in the UK didn't even know how apples grew. They don't know where potatoes come from. They don't know what meat is unless it's in a packet. It's insane to me that people don't understand these things, but it makes sense because of the way that we are as consumers. But if we don't educate, we're going to get nowhere, right? So the people that we are training and educating now are the people who are going to be the policy changers and makers and doers later. But we stopped educating a long time ago through convenience.
Yes. And
so it's kind of I think a lot of people are recognising that now. We're starting to see a lot of awareness, social media and general media has a lot to answer for in a lot of ways, but the good thing about that exposure is that people are starting to see a lot more, do a lot more, behave differently, and enact change in their own homes around these things because they're exposed. And it's so nice to be able to have an opportunity to make change, even if it's in a very small way. It's still change.
Yeah.
So all those little bits add up. So if you start educating, for me, for example, I train all of my chefs into the way that I work, for the mindset of zero waste. The bin is lower than the last resort, Yeah. There's so many avenues that we can traverse between there and there, and the compost bin isn't the first option. So if I train all of my chefs and then they eventually leave, go out, and then they train their chefs and then they train their chefs, and that flow-on effect of change is happening. It's a small ripple effect, but it's a ripple effect, so it's good that we have the opportunity to do that. I think we need to nurture our talent more.
Yeah.
It'd be great if we could see some more like commercial layering in that. Like I think MasterChef even is starting to do a bit more around that, which is really cool.
And what happens at cooking school? What?
Culinary school.
Culinary school. What?
Not a lot, to be honest. I've actually just been invited to sit on an advisory board at William Anglers to discuss the change that they need to make, the changes that they could make from an industry relevant person. What do they need to be teaching students now? So it'd be really interesting, because I just did an event at William Anglers a couple of weeks ago called the Great Chefs thing, where it's like a fundraising lunch, and someone comes in, a chef comes in, and they teach a class a menu, and then we present the menu, and it goes out to the public at a lunch function. It's just really interesting because like I was talking to all the chefs and like showing them how we were going to use like all the greens from the farm and all the pumpkin with the skins and the seeds and everything, and they were just like mind blown.
Yeah, right.
Because they were like, what do you mean you don't throw the stems away? What do you mean you don't peel the pumpkins? Like, what are we going to do with that stuff? And I'm like, we'll make a stock. We'll use the skins. We'll like, and they were just like, they could not understand it. And I'm like, how? What are you teaching these kids?
And how did you find out about those things?
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And curiosity and research.
A lot of it comes down to curiosity. I've been a chef. This year is my 26th year as a chef, which is a long time. And over that time, I've worked in a multifaceted set of restaurants, like from like catering to like, weddings to fine dining kitchens to not fine dining kitchens, like all sorts, everything. And the common thread amongst all of that is waste. It's just a variation on waste. And a lot of that comes down to rules, like you can't save food that's been heated, of all of those things. And that's really good. We need those rules. That's important. But understanding how to be more specific around the recipe development, what you're putting on the plate, like excess isn't always better. Like, how do we refine this process to create less waste is kind of where it started. Because I couldn't stand to see all my hard work going in the bin. And then I translated that to like, that's a lot of money going in the bin. And then I'm like, how could we take some of that money back? And then how can we take the hours back that I put into that work? Like, it just continues to, you continue to break it down until you're sort of at the point where it's like, it's actually all just about waste.
Yeah.
So if we were able to taper that in, we would save money, I would save time, and I wouldn't be throwing money, wouldn't be putting all that money in the bin. So it just kind of went from there. And as I progressed through my career, it was more and more about the dollars and cents. Because I became higher in the kitchen, I became able to manage that stuff and got really granular with it. And then because of that, I was working with a friend of mine who did her PhD in food waste systems, and got really into the detail with her around, she created a system called Watch My Waste, and she had it across a bunch of restaurants, and they were literally measuring their food waste from different avenues, so like production to off the plate. And so they would see at the end of the day what was coming off the plates into a waste bin and what was coming out of production into a waste bin, and they would weigh their waste every day. And then they calculate it, and she would put it into a graph and show them over time how their waste was going. And so at the beginning it was very high, and by the time they finished the project it was very low, because it was just because they recognised what was happening. So what was coming off the plates, they would look at that and go, okay, there's way too many chips on the plate, for example, or there's too much bread coming back from eggs on toast. Like, let's just serve eggs on toast with one slice of bread. Let's just put less chips on the plate, tapering in their portions so that there was less coming back on the plate. There's less going out, less coming back. Customers are happy, and they're making more money. So they're like, okay, well, if we can do that with what's coming back on the plate, we can do that with what's happening in the kitchen. And so everything tapered down, and then all of a sudden they're a more profitable business purely because they educated themselves and were more aware.
Yeah.
And that was just a really interesting turning point for me in watching and understanding how that worked in that project across the board. And I was like, oh, okay, this is really something. And so I just started like watching everything more closely in the restaurants, like understanding like the processing of things in the restaurants, how chefs were working, like looking in the bins in kitchens, making sure people understood what to do with things and how to process things. And it just became more and more and more niche, I guess. And then it's just sort of developed into this real obsession around like we can't waste herb stalks. And, when we were making our own chai, we were using all the aromats from the garden, and I was like, we can't just throw these in the bin once they've been infused in water. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So we started dehydrating all the aromats and then blending them into a powder and putting them on the top of the chai. And we would have the powder left over. And so there was too much, obviously, to just be shaking on chai. So we started a chai spice granola. So we'd use the spices in the granola, and it was amazing. It's so delicious.
Yeah.
Very aromatic and delicious, but not overwhelming because it's been poached already, so half of that flavour is gone, but it's still flavour and it's nice.
So is your mind going all the time?
It never stops. It never ever stops.
But that's where, it's the boundaries of being a chef are just it's a huge job at your level where you're thinking of all of those things, but then you've got menu creation, and then you've got technique, and then you've got training your staff.
Yeah.
Like, you're just it's huge.
Yeah, I call it octopus. Like, my mind is like an octopus. Like, I've always got like 8 tentacles out, sort of like I'm looking in 4 different directions. I've got my hands in different pies. I'm kind of stirring this. I'm on the phone here. I'm doing that. Like, there's just always something. This is like the beauty of an ADHD mind, right? Like, I don't switch off.
Yeah.
And my hyper focus, I guess, comes down to food. And so it's flavours to me is like breathing. It just happens naturally. Like, I see things and hear things and taste things, and things just happen without me realising it's happening. Like, that's the beauty of a neurodivergent brain, right? Like, it just happens. I think it's taken me a long time to harness the power, and it's been a developmental process through that, my journey of my career. But it's something that I'm really grateful for now. I hated it at the beginning, and I'm really grateful for now. It took me a long time to build the discipline, to harness the power. But I'm very grateful for it now, because it's something that I'm recognising not everybody has. And it's now a point of difference that I can celebrate rather than like try and hide.
For sure.
Which is really cool.
And I read somewhere that you didn't really consider being a chef.
Oh yeah,
initially.
No. I was just so terrified of the chefs in the kitchen. Because when I was a kid, like, I worked when I was like 14. I started in a deli part-time on school holidays, and then when I was a little bit older, I went to a restaurant and I started on the floor as a waiter, and I was like, yeah, this is okay. And then I went into the kitchen, I was like, as a kitchen hand. And I was like, oh, this is so much better than being out there, because it's a bit like I had to, back in the 90s, I had to wear a skirt to work and like wear a nice apron and like,
you're right.
And I was like, I can't handle this. This is like not me.
Yeah.
And so they stuck me in the kitchen for a bit to help out. And I was like, oh yeah, this is all right. But the chefs were a bit gnarly. Like, there was a bit of a sort of cowboys game back in the 90s. For sure. And I was like, well, they're a bit scary. And then I went to I did an advanced diploma of hospitality management straight out of school. And so I started working in quite a big hotel, a resort on the Sunshine Coast. And the head chef there was one of those guys who was this giant German stoic creature that wore a big tall hat, and he was always full whites, always with a stretched white apron, like crispy.
Wow.
Euro chef, like very intimidating. And he just terrified me. And that brigade of chefs was enormous. There was probably 20 or 30 chefs in there. And they were like, it was very intimidating. And so when I left that and moved to Melbourne, I started trying to look for like front of house jobs because that's pretty much mostly what I'd done. And because of my degree or my diploma, so I was like, oh, I'll just do front of house. And then I just gradually got sucked in to the kitchen more. And then someone said, oh, why don't you just do your apprenticeship? And I was like, well, I don't know if I could actually do that. I don't know if I could be in the kitchen full time. And then I just sort of bit the bullet and was like, yeah, I'll just give it a go. And so I started and I was like, actually, this is really cool. This is like all of the things, like it's structured, but it's not structured. There's lots of time and creative play, but it's busy, but it's like, you know, quiet times. And it kind of suited my brain. Yeah. And I just progressed from there. I did a lot of jobs in my first 2 years and didn't really find my feet. I moved to Sydney and started working at Bistro Moncur.
Okay.
And I was just like, what the fuck? Like, my prep list was all French terminology, and the brigade was 50-50, men and women. And the food that they were producing, I was just like, it's one of those moments, I guess, it's like a real pivotal moment in my life where I was just like, my eyes were saucers and my jaw was on the floor, and I was just like, fuck, what the fuck is this place? This is amazing. I have to be here. And I got the job, which was really exciting for me, and started working there. And I was just like, it was one of the hardest transitional periods of my life, I guess. Like, the people were really nice, but I, as a person, struggled with the discipline of that kitchen. Like, it was, you just constantly had to be better. And you just, you know, and I hadn't really trained in that way where the accountability was so high. And it took me a while to sort of understand that unless you're really honest at the beginning of a mistake, that mistake will come back and bite you so hard in service that you just can't hide. You cannot hide in a space like that. You just... Like, I would try and, like, squirrel things away that I'd made mistakes on, or, like, you know, try and, like in the fear that I would get into trouble was so great that I would try and hide the mistake, and then I would figure out that later that I would get into trouble so much more. So I was like, it took me a minute to catch up on that idea. And once I caught into it, I was like, right, if I just go straight away to the chef and say, I've made a mistake, how do I fix it? The learning process of how to fix it was far greater an opportunity than the getting in trouble part. So that outweighed.
How old were you?
I was, I think I was maybe 20.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to boarding school, and like I was very immature and young in the mind.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to sort of grow, I guess, and learn as an adult, like to be an adult. Slow to mature, they say. I'm there now, don't worry. It's taken me 30 years, but I
don't know. I think I was the same. I don't know that. Yeah. I still don't know if I've got
I think I came from a very insulated upbringing, you know, very small-ish country town growing up, went to boarding school, very isolated, like insular, not isolated, insular, you know, and then left school and went straight into a comfy little course and had a nice little group of friends and was very insular again. And then when I moved to Melbourne, I was a little bit more exposed, and then moved to Sydney, was very exposed.
Yeah.
And it sort of like rapidly caught up with me. And so, yeah, anyway, the learning process far outweighed the fear of getting into trouble. And once I recognised that, I was like, right, learning. And I just pushed myself really hard to just try not to make mistakes. And if I did, to learn how to correct them very quickly. And that process of growing and discipline and like the food that they were doing, it just cemented everything that I ever have been, like, it cemented my love of food in a way that I hadn't had before, because it was just, I think they're culturally rich because it was French food, and it was just the history of it and like the romance around the passion everyone had for it, and like the development process. It was so pivotal in my life, that part of my learning. And then I moved to London and was in London with another sort of very insulated little niche French restaurant, and that just layered on.
Did you know you were going to that restaurant?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you went and you found the work there. Wow. Yeah.
And it was just one of those places that it's just like another layer on top of the culturally significant sort of like very French provincial food. So what we were doing in Sydney was beautiful, like incredible French food. What we were doing in London was not as fine, but it was more rooted in the history of the French provincial style. And so I learned a lot more culturally about what we were doing and how the processing and the intricacies of the seasons that they have and where things come from and the different provinces and like that. But just like made so much more sense to me then. So it's just really rich developmentally, and it's just, I guess, solidified my love of food and the history of food and the culture of food. And then I've gone on to develop in different areas from there. But I think that fundamental learning and that pivotal point in my life of like, I could have gone either way. I could have kind of gone down the rat bag route, or I went down the more disciplined route, and yeah.
And you've said you've worked across a lot of different venues and styles and all of those things in different countries and cities. Does there come a time when you need to move on because you need more challenge, or what?
Yeah.
How does that shape? How's your journey?
I think life is it's a big spectrum, right? So there's been different requirements. I've had different requirements in my life, different needs to meet. London for me was all about learning. I wanted to learn so much and do so much and just constantly be better. And coming home from London, it was more about changing my lifestyle because I was so burnt out from the craziness of London and like, you know, the stupid amounts of hours. Like my biggest ever week in London, I think, was 111 hours. And you know, you get paid for 38. So, and there's no question of overtime, you know, and you're literally doing 4 times the amount of hours in a week that you should
still
be.
happen in London? Yeah.
Not as much, and the pay's a lot better now. But yeah, it's just like, for me, that was a second apprenticeship, you know, like I did 4 years in Australia and then I did another 4 years in London. And by the time I came home, I was just so burnt out and exhausted and just frayed. I was frayed in all ways. I just didn't have the mental capacity to keep that up. I didn't have the physical capacity to keep that up. And I sort of settled into a lifestyle that was more sustainable for me, which was like cafe work. And I was of the generation of chefs that kind of was like at that peak where they were like, I've done so much, I've learnt so much, but I'm so burnt out. I need to just work days and have a life again. And so there was a bunch of chefs that kind of were of my level of training that just went, no, fuck it, days. And so we started Cafe World as cafes, eggs on toast, and then we slowly built up the bar and turned the cafe scene in Melbourne into the cafe scene in Melbourne. So it was like a whole bunch of chefs that just around the same time just decided, fuck it, we're not going to be restaurant chefs anymore, but we want to be restaurant chefs in the day. And
absolutely.
So we kind of changed the landscape of the Melbourne dining scene by like going, had enough of nights, but I still really want to do good food. And so we just translated that into daytime. And that was when like Code Black, Kettle Black, like Top Paddock, Proud Mary, we kind of all opened it around the same time. It was like 2011 to sort of 2013, like that couple of years, it just exploded on the scene. And then all of a sudden it was acceptable for these chefs with this amazing training to be working days, and it was more respectable. And yeah, sure, we cooked a lot of eggs, but we still did great food. And like, it's just the changing landscape.
Absolutely. That's when I arrived in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was I felt like it was the same thing that happened when movie stars started acting in TV shows, and that was okay. To me, it was the same kind of thing where in the past, working in a cafe wasn't really, seen as whatever.
Wasn't the done thing.
Wasn't the done thing, as acting in a TV show might not have been. And now we have these cinematic TV shows, and now we have these cafes with these top chefs, which brings its own challenges, because to cook that kind of top food, but at a daytime price.
Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like getting people to understand that paying the same amount for breakfast as you would for dinner was a big shift.
Absolutely.
That's been a massive turning point for the industry. And we still can't get people around that fully, but it's turned a lot.
Yeah.
People are now sort of going out for breakfast than they were going out for dinner, and now the night trade is suffering because of that.
Yeah.
But it's great though, because people have options.
Yeah. It's amazing to be part of that historical wave.
Kind of didn't realise that we were doing it until we did it. And then, once we were I was Code Black, and so once Code Black, Top Paddock, and Proud Mary, and Seven Seeds, and there's a few that sort of like opened around the same time, and it was all the coffee roasters, all about coffee. And then it became about the coffee going with the food, and then having to match the food with the coffee. And then like it just kept layering. We kept layering on top of each other, just going like, Top Paddock's doing this hot cake situation, and then we were doing coffee cured salmon, and then all of a sudden there was cafes all over Melbourne doing coffee cured salmon, and it was just like watching it happen on socials was like, it was the biggest compliment to watch people start to copy what we were doing. We were like, like the guys in the kitchen would come to me and be like, oh, look at these assholes, they're doing what we're doing. And I'm like, no, that's actually really cool. And they're like, what do you mean? They're copying you. And I'm like, exactly. That means we're doing something really cool. And they're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then like the progress sort of watching that unfold was really special. It was, it's a pivotal moment, I guess, to sort of sit back and recognise that we were part of a huge movement change in the scene, and that's like, I guess that's something to be really proud of. It's a different landscape now because there's just so many people doing it.
Yeah,
it's crazy, but it's kind of cool that we were part of the change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And is Heide quiet over winter?
Typically it used to be very sort of moody landscape and quite wet and windy. But last year we've been in talks with the museum a lot over the last couple of years in changing the way that they lay out the shows. So typically they would always put their highest grossing shows on in summer, and they would have a boom in summer and their lowest grossing shows on in winter. And so we said to them, like, it's Heide, like, we're going to be busy in summer regardless.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we put on the biggest show of the year in winter and the lower end of the scale in summer, so we get a more even playing field, and we can kind of like level it out staffing wise for you and for us, and sort of like, spread it out a little bit. And they were like, yeah, okay. And so they did that last year, and that was incredibly successful for winter. It was a game changer for winter. It was very difficult summer.
Yeah.
But we're kind of like treading water with how that looks, like changing the way they format their shows or whatever. But like because winter was so successful, they're doing it again this year.
Okay.
Which is great. We're always going to have ups and downs. It was just more about lowering the threshold between the up and the down so that it's a little bit more even.
Yeah.
Because if we're just purely seasonal, we have to have a whole new team for summer, and that's hard because we to train a whole new team, to retain staff throughout the year, to have consistency in business is everything. So the more consistent we can have our team and then build them up in summer and then taper them down in winter is better for us, right? Because we have a lot of uni students that don't work a lot in winter but can work a lot in summer because they're on holidays.
Yeah.
So that works really well for us, but having the consistency through winter is everything, because we'd get to the point where we were like dragging our feet to get through the day in winter, which is awful for everyone.
Awful. Yeah.
And then in summer we were just absolutely running ourselves ragged because we have all the events on in summer as well. So we started like changing, like we've curated a few different styles of events that we can sell through winter. Sell in general throughout the year, so it's less enormous events and more sort of tailored events. So like coming in for a private viewing in the afternoon, doing a show, private viewing and a tour with a talk, and then coming up and having a dinner at dusk. So it's beautiful. The dining room is stunning. The lighting is amazing. And then you come out after having a unique experience in here to a unique experience in there, and it's quite intimate because it's like 40 people. It's a beautiful way to celebrate a team, you know, or to do something special. Or if you're, for example, having a wedding, you get married under the big old oak tree, you go off and have your photos, your guests come down and do a private viewing of the museum, have cocktail hour on the courtyard, and then come in and have dinner, and then you can come in and join them. So like it's a completely unique experience to Melbourne. Like no other city in Australia has that access to something so simple and so beautiful and so unique. So developing ways to sell those packages has been really pivotal as well, in terms of like creating more consistency throughout the year rather than everyone just celebrating end of the year or like special events. It's like this is actually something really unique that you can use as a team building exercise, for example.
For sure.
And it's just a nice way to do things that's a little bit different, very unique to Melbourne, which kind of makes it a bit more special. So,
and perhaps with I'm sure you need to get into the kitchen because it's going to get busy.
Yeah.
Just I usually end with this, and you've had so much experience and you're so reflective as well. What would your advice be to a young person starting out as a chef?
Education is everything, you know, it doesn't matter if you go to the best school or the worst school, you're in charge of how much you learn. So if you have an interest in something, just study, you know, and study could look different in so many ways. It could be watching a great YouTube channel, it could be researching in the library, it could be eating in different places, it could be travelling, you know. If you have an interest in something, just study it in a way that suits you. And just learn as much as possible about as many things as you can fit in. And mental health is everything. You have to have respect for that as well. And that's a huge part of my journey, has been learning how to balance my hyperfixation on topics and people and things, and not allowing myself to get to the point of burnout every single time. Learning how to sort of taper, I guess, is like sort of get to a point that's exciting and thrive off that, but also learning that I need some downtime as well, and sort of balancing the downtime with the hyperfixation and the zoning in on things. Because I spent a lot of my career like really thrashing myself and not allowing myself the space to recover.
Yeah.
So recovery is a huge part of expending. You know, you can't just spend all the energy and then not have any time to recover. So like just allowing yourself small spaces to do that is really important. I think just education and recovery, huge. Yeah.
Thanks, Laura.
No worries. I feel like I just talked your ear off.
I loved it.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Conversation with a Chef with Laura Boulton at Heide Kitchen. You can check out all the goodness on Instagram at Heide Kitchen, that's Heide Kitchen, and Laura's own account at the.wandering.chef. And if you'd like to hear more stories from other chefs, I'm also on Instagram at Conversation with a Chef. You can read this chat online at www.conversationwithachef.com, and of course you can follow me on Apple and Spotify podcasts. I would absolutely love it if you told a friend about my chats. I still think it's the best way to get these delicious stories out into the world. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Have a great day and bon appetit.